Counsel public meeting. My name is Diamond Conley. I am the Executive Director of the Right to Counsel. And I just want to take some time to introduce you to my team as well. Ms. Valerie Pilot over here is my Deputy Director. She has been super helpful with helping me pull things together and just really coordinate throughout the year. And so very appreciative of her. I have Ms. Lake McCants over here. She is my data analyst, and I would not have wanted to present without her approval. And so very grateful to have Lake on my team as well. And then last but certainly not least, we have our panel over here. We have Mr. Conrad Mallett, Corporation Counsel for the City of Detroit, Mr. Ted Phillips, from Executive Director of the United Community Housing Coalition, and Ms. Ashley Lowe, CEO of Lakeshore Legal Aid. So my panel is here to help me fill in the gaps wherever they may be, and kind of tell us a little bit about the history that maybe I don't, connect with, or they have more knowledge about, and also just answer any questions or comments that you all may have for me. And so I will start by talking about the progress and success of the Right to Counsel so far, and then I'll open it up for questions and comments from you all in the audience and our virtual audience. So what is the Right to Counsel? I think most of us in this room especially know what the Right to Counsel ordinance is, but for those who do not, in the city of Detroit, there is a law called Right to Counsel that helps people who rent their homes and are facing eviction. This ordinance gives tenants the right to have a free lawyer in court to help them. The Office of Eviction Defense is my office with the city of Detroit, and I work with our legal services agencies to make sure that tenants who are in 36th District Court for landlord-tenant matters get the legal representation that they need. The types of cases covered are those that are needing for possession from an occupant or any residential property, or cases which threaten the occupancy, including but not limited to eviction proceedings, mortgage foreclosures, property tax foreclosures, land forfeiture proceedings, and threats to rent subsidies. To be eligible for the Right to Counsel, tenants do have to be at or below 200% of the federal poverty level, and they have to be a Detroit resident. Most tenants don't know if they're at or below 200% of the federal poverty level, and so we do require certain documents from them to assess that. If a tenant receives DHS benefits, Medicaid benefits, if their household has qualified for state emergency relief, even their most recent pay stubs, all of those documents can assist our tenants with knowing if they're eligible for the Right to Counsel. And so the Right to Counsel ordinance was passed in 2022, but the city Right to Counsel did not start taking cases in 36th District Court until March of 2023. And so the United Community Housing Coalition was selected as our primary legal service provider to coordinate those services in 36th District Court. We have a lot of case filings in 36th District Court, and so they subcontracted with Michigan Legal Services, Legal Aid and Defender, and Lakeshore Legal Aid. We have all of those partners in court 5 days a week representing our tenants. UCHC, MLS, and LADA are there on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and then on Tuesdays and Fridays, we have Lakeshore Legal Aid. I am proud to say that our program has just hit our 2-year anniversary, which is exciting for me. And so I hope to have us continue to move forward. So who funds the Right to Counsel? We have several partners pouring into the pot to support our tenants with Right to Counsel. Our mayor plus city council awarded $18 million in federal funds to Right to Counsel for full representation of tenants at 36th District Court through 2026. City Right to Counsel has also been awarded $4 million in state grant funds thanks to our Right to Counsel coalition efforts. Those funds will also go towards providing full rep, tenant outreach, and other tenant needs as discussed between myself, the Right to Counsel Coalition, and of course, what our City Council approves. Gilbert Family Foundation is here, and they have also designated $12 million plus for their full representation in advice-only cases. And then we have State Bar of Michigan, Legal Services Corporation, and others who also fund a portion of Right to Counsel cases through our legal service providers. I do want to note with the $4 million that I only have a contract from the state for $2.5 million, and so you'll hear me talk later about requests for proposals that I have out. The 1.5 million, I don't actually have access to those funds yet, but when they are received, I will update you all about what we will do with those funds. And everybody is needed, right, to pour into the Right to Counsel pot because in 2024, we saw 20,593 eviction cases filed at 36 District Court. Non-payment of rent was the highest case type filed in 2024. Our city Right to Counsel was able to cover 28.6% of those non-payment cases. Termination of tenancy was the second highest case type filed. Our city Right to Counsel was able to cover 32.9%. That means that a significant portion of the cases are being paid for under our other funding sources, such as Gilbert Family Foundation and the State Bar. And so we do need our partners to make sure that tenants can receive full legal representation as much as possible. And so thanks to all of the legal services organizations for providing me with this data. This is just a snapshot of what is happening to the best of my ability under all funding sources. And so I did a side-by-side comparison. This is what I shared in 2023, and this is what we saw in 2024. And again, what we saw is 20,593 eviction cases filed in 36 District Court. That's a 400 case decrease, which I'm happy about. It's definitely still a lot of cases, but I'm happy about any decrease. And it's certainly a decrease from the 30,000 eviction cases that we saw pre-pandemic. We believe that about 20% of the tenants who are eligible for Right to Counsel, 20% of the tenants who have cases filed in 36 District Court will not be eligible for Right to Counsel due to being over income. And so if we accept that estimate, we believe that there are about 16,474 tenants who were eligible for Right to Counsel, and that would include our default tenants, who we actually saw appearing in court and who were eligible and received Right to Counsel services were 10,881 tenants for 2024. That shows that we believe about 5,500 tenants had eviction cases filed, but they likely defaulted. Our default population is a population I mentioned last year, and it's still a population that we need to do a better job of reaching. And so, again, you'll hear me talk about requests for proposals, where I'm asking you all to give me ideas about outreach and how to reach our default population. But I do want to recognize that that's something we need to work on. However, out of the 10,881 tenants that appeared, 8,387 of them received full representation. That means 2,494 received brief legal services. There is 77% of tenants who appeared and were eligible in court that received full legal representation. That's an increase from the 59% that I reported last year, and certainly an increase from the 4% in 2022 that were receiving representation prior to the Right to Counsel existing. So for 2024, the City Right to Counsel covered, again, 6,085 cases. That means that 2,302 tenants received full representation based on our partners funding those cases. We had 69 attorneys working on the Right to Counsel, and we had 36 legal assistants. So how much does this cost? I think that is a common question that I receive, and it's not easy to answer just because this program is fairly new and there's been a lot of kinks that we've been working through. But if we just take what we closed for 2024, the 6,085 cases, every case can be billed at a rate of $760 per case. There is discussion about if there needs to be more, but currently every case is billed at $760 per case. There's a 12% admin charge. And so if we just do the basic math of that, it cost us $5.1 million to cover just the cases billed to the city of Detroit. However, in the last slide I shared, there were 10,881 tenants who appeared in court, needed full representation, but did not necessarily receive that. If we wanted to provide full rep for all of those tenants, that takes us to about $9.2 million. If we weave in our default population, who we do want to be thinking about, that's the 16,474. It would cost us over $14 million to cover all of those tenants. Keep in mind, that is not including outreach services that the Right to Counsel needs. That does not include keeping me, Valerie, and Lake around. These are just basic legal costs that I wanted to share. So up until this point, I've tried to talk about what's happening with all of the funding partners because, it's important. But I can only talk about demographics and outcomes when it comes to cases billed to the city of Detroit. And so as we talk about demographics and outcomes, keep in mind that Gilbert Family Foundation may at some point tell us what's happening with their cases, but I can only talk about what I'm seeing under the city right to counsel at this point. And what we're seeing is that postal code 48228 showed the highest rate of residents who received city right to counsel representation. The other ones highlighted are the other 4 postal codes with the highest rates. In October of 2024, our program actually went into zip code 48205 and just had a community event to show those residents that we are there. Valerie was able to connect them to Wayne Metro, to our housing services, to our employment services with the city of Detroit. And so we will continue to go into these zip codes where we know are impacted the most by eviction filings and just hold community events so that they know that we are there and we want to connect them to resources that they need. In 2023, Right to Counsel served 27% of young families with a head of household in their 30s. And in 2024, this age bracket continued to be the most impacted. From the start of the program, March 23 through December 24, seniors were present in 27.7% of all cases represented by the city. Between 23 and 24, 32.7% of all cases represented under the city were for a person living alone. Children were present in 54.9% of cases, disabled individuals present in 23.8%, and veterans present in 2.5% of all households. For me, I think it kind of shows that there are a variety of different people impacted by the eviction crisis. Some people may assume it's, a mother with children. Some may assume it's seniors on limited income. But 32% of our cases are people who simply live alone and may not be able to keep up with the increased rent. Wages are not necessarily growing at the rate that they need them to be growing at. And so I think our right to counsel attorneys are doing a good job with just being able to accommodate as many different household types as possible. Between 23 and 24, tenants living in their homes from 1 to 5 years made up 42.6% of all cases. If we look right above that, people living in their home less than a year are the most impacted. And so for me, this kind of triggers a cycle of instability that I'm imagining, right? You have thousands of tenants each year who are not able to stay in their home even a year and, barely making it to 5 years. And so if you're unstable with housing, there may be instability with their children in the household and schooling, and there may be instability with income as well. And so I think it's important for the right to counsel to, as much as we can, keep people in their homes. And if we can't keep them in their homes, then try to make the relocation process as smooth as possible and advocate for them to have as much time as possible to relocate if that's needed. In both 23 and 24, the highest rate of tenants served by the right to counsel earned between $10,000 and $20,000 annually. In 2024, we saw that 90.8% of tenants served by the city right to counsel earned less than $40,000 annually. African American households accessed the city right to counsel most frequently in 2024, and female-headed households represented 73.7%. And so just as reflected last year, African American women as head of household made up 92.6% of tenant cases represented in 2024 and continue to be the demographic in the city most impacted by eviction filings. In terms of the types of cases that the city right to counsel is covering, subsidy cases made up 23% of all city right to counsel cases. And so that leaves us with 77% of cases being private landlord tenant or unsubsidized matters. And so where does that leave us? We've talked about what the cases look like, the types of households that we work with, but what kind of outcomes are we seeing? So I mentioned that in 2024, the city right to counsel closed or covered 6,085 cases. But overall, from March 23 through December of 24, the city right to counsel has represented 7,651 households from the start through December. Out of those households, 3,546 of those cases represented by the city right to counsel resulted in tenants retaining possession of their home. That means 46.3% of tenants who receive full rep under city right to counsel retain possession. That's an increase from the 45.7% that I reported for 2023. That leaves us with 53.7% of tenants who work with right to counsel needing to relocate. However, our right to counsel attorneys are doing great work and able to advocate beyond the statutory minimum of 10 days for 94.1% of our tenants, with those tenants receiving at least 30 to 60 days to vacate. We're aware of 248 tenant cases that resulted in a writ being signed, and even in those cases, our right to counsel attorneys still advocated, and they were able to come to an agreement that allowed the tenant to stay in their home, prevent the eviction. The writ may have been denied or quashed, or the tenant received more than the statutory minimum to vacate. We're aware of only 24 cases that resulted in a bailiff executed eviction, and that's a number that we want to have at zero as much as possible, but we are tracking it, and it is a very small number when our tenants work with the right to counsel. I mentioned before that we covered the 1,742 cases so far. In those cases, our right to counsel attorneys were able to preserve the subsidy in 90% of those cases. We have just a few land forfeiture and contract cases. In 2023, we were able to preserve ownership in 56.3% of those cases. And in 2024, we were able to retain ownership for 52% of those clients. For 24 and 15 of the cases, the client might not have been able to retain ownership, but our attorneys negotiated agreements, and so the client did not have to move. They were able to rent the home. And in 29 of the cases, they needed to vacate, but were given more than the statutory time to vacate. We also wanted to take a look at how our right to counsel was doing in comparison to other right to counsels across the nation. And so we are aware of 25 localities that have right to counsel programs, including Detroit. And I have listed these cities, counties, and states here. Even though there are 25 localities, only 15 of them are reporting their data so far and their progress. And only 10 of those localities started after the pandemic and track data similarly to what our program does. And so if we look at the chart to the left, we see that the national average of retaining possession, if tenants work with the right to counsel, is 65.2%. Those years are actually the years that the programs started in those localities, but these are all 2024 averages. And so our program is 2 years old and has a rate of 46% of tenants retaining possession. However, I do want to note that our program started 2 to 3 years later than majority of the reporting localities. And so I'm hopeful that as the right to counsel continues and we learn from some of these localities, we tap into what they're doing and what they've learned, that we can grow our home retention rate as well. Money judgments. And so we took cases where there was a total of 270 tenants where a money judgment was being requested. Right to counsel attorneys were able to resolve the money judgment in 79.3% of those cases, with the money judgment being denied. And I think the last area that I want to cover is the certificate of compliance. We all know, for the most part, that the certificate of compliance and rental registration of landlords in the city of Detroit is a huge issue. I think the city of Detroit has been doing what we can to work on this, and so there has been changes to our rental ordinance to protect tenants a little bit more. We're revamping our escrow system, and so moving that from BC to HRD. And there are actually, working conversations happening between landlords, tenant advocates, and the city of Detroit. And so we're trying to create a process to increase this. On our side of things with the right to counsel, I've also been trying to keep track of how many of our cases have properties that do not have the certificate of compliance or rental registration. And so we were able to identify at the beginning of the case that 72.5% of our cases had a property that did not have an active CFC. 48.3% of those tenants reported having a repair issue as well, and 11.6% stated that they reported it to be seed. That number is probably higher than 72.5%, a lot higher, but that is what we tracked at the beginning of the case. For rental registration, we had 44.6 say that their property was unregistered, 46.8% stated that they had repair issues, and 11.7% stated that they reported that to BSeed. And so my office proceeded to talk to BSeed and say, what are you doing to address this? And BSeed inspectors actually began attending litigation in 36th District Court in April of 2024. Based on them attending that litigation, they identified roughly 5,000 properties throughout the city without occupancy permits or rental registration. They decided to tackle the properties in districts 2 and 3 first. And in those districts, they started posting placards to let the landlords know that they had a housing violation, the consequence of those violations, upcoming inspection dates, and advising the landlord they could not rent the property until the violation was resolved. So in districts 2 and 3, there were 821 placards posted, 349 inspections, and that resulted in rental registration for 95 properties and certificate of compliance obtained for 70 properties in districts 2 and 3. And so it's slow progress, but it's steady with BC being in the court, and they will continue to be in court to identify those properties and try to increase registration through 2025. And so what's next for the right to counsel? What's on my radar? I have Miss Ashley Lowe here who will come up in a moment and kind of talk about the things that we have been coordinating on, which include a content hub website that will contain 45 videos and 24 fact sheets for our for our tenants to access information about landlord-tenant matters. We're also working on an online intake and income verification system. Currently, our tenants complete the intake in court, which is not ideal. It's a busy process and it's time consuming. And so we'd like to have a system where at least they can do the online portion or the intake online. And then when they come to court, our attorneys are ready to actually talk about the case. There's a partnership and marketing kit also being developed with Lakeshore Legal Aid and our Right to Counsel Coalition. And so that should be rolling out over the summer. We will continue to go on our zip codes that are most impacted by eviction filings and hold those community events. So I will let you all know when those are coming. I've mentioned a couple times requests for proposals. So with the state funding, I currently have a request for proposal for people to let me know how I should do outreach, right? How can we reach our default population? What kind of outreach needs to happen? And so I'm encouraging you all in the room to, if you have an idea, please share it with me through the RFP. And then we have a second one for continuing to provide full legal representation. I've been also talking with HRD and our housing helpline. And so we have quite a few subsidized tenants calling who need access to right to counsel attorneys right away. And so the goal is to have the helpline complete an intake and then transfer those subsidized clients right to a right to counsel attorney instead of having them on hold. And so we're trying to work through that process, and I'm hoping to see that roll out in the next couple of months as well. I think advocacy is an important question that many of you probably have. And so on my end of things, Councilwoman Sheffield has been very supportive and open to setting up stakeholder meetings and kind of talking to me about what we're going to do about funding right to counsel post ARPA. She was actually here earlier just to show her support. And so I'll continue to have those meetings with her. I've been meeting with the Right to Counsel Coalition, and they've done a great job with securing $4 million in state grant funding that I plan to hold on to. I have to turn in quarterly reports to the state and let them know what we need the money for and how we're spending it. And so my goal is to hold on to that as much as possible and provide any data that the coalition needs from me. We've been trying to survey our tenant population a little better and understand what the experience is like in real time for our tenants. And so I got a little bit of feedback that I'll share with you in a moment, but I want to kind of think through how we can get both positive and negative experiences from tenants and make the process better. And so definitely open to suggestions about that. And finally, there is a mediation service supported by SCAO, and it's called MI Resolve. We have 20,000 eviction filings a year, and we can't necessarily pay for all of those people. And so we want to think about how we can maybe resolve some of these disputes before they get into 36th District Court. And this may be an option that I'm exploring, with the understanding that we always need to make sure that tenants are protected, right? So it has to be a mediation that, doesn't make tenants feel overwhelmed or bombarded or like, they're being railroaded. But it is something that I think we can all at least consider. And these are some of the testimonials that we received, again, all very positive. And so that tells me that we may need to adjust how we're collecting that information. But it is something that I'm open to suggestion about. And that's it for me for the moment. Thank you all for listening. Mr. Ted Phillips here would like a moment just to kind of give us some insight and historical perspective on things. And Ted has been around a while, and so I want Ted to be able to discuss things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I just want to take a couple minutes just to put in perspective what right to counsel has meant. Prior to COVID, the city of Detroit, 36th District Court was seeing 30,000 cases a year. Back in the era of Chief Judge Atkins, it was more like 40,000. We were the worst city in the country for eviction cases. We had about 4% that were of the tenants were represented. We've gone from, there was very limited representation, obviously, but also there was something I called the 2-minute hearing. What was a 2-minute hearing? That was where the tenant appeared, landlord appeared with an attorney, judge asked the landlord's attorney, what's going on here? Well, they owe us $2,000. Tenant, did you pay the money? Well, Your Honor, but it ended there. Too often it ended there. And that's the way things went before. There was focus on churning out cases, getting them done, and we should never, ever, ever go back to that. That changed tremendously when this mayor had the foresight to fund. Really, the first right to counsel was COVID year, September 2020, when the administration came through with $5 million to say, we got to do something about what's about to happen here with evictions. Some of that money was spent for financial assistance. We also set up at that time the system that now works today, where there's 3 agencies, now 4 agencies, but then 3 agencies that were working in every courtroom, every time we were there. It was in Zoom, but that was the model, and that's still the model today. The model today, we work with trying to represent as many tenants as we can, but there's still not enough to cover everybody. We are able, though, to get the more problematic cases, those cases where the tenants are most vulnerable. Subsidized cases, we put a priority on them. Some of the results of right to counsel has been we've done away with a 2-minute hearing. Even when tenants are not represented now with attorneys sitting in the courtroom, this does not happen anymore. I've been there many, many, many times myself. Why? Because the plaintiff's counsel know if they overreach, the judge is going to say, well, you sure you don't want to get counsel, defendant, and something's going to happen. So they don't do that anymore. We've reduced the number of cases by about 1/3. It was still way too many cases in the city of Detroit, over 20,000 cases. We're still probably one of the highest in the nation. But 10,000 cases less in just this time is a remarkable accomplishment. And it's something that other cities have seen with right to counsel. So we need to keep in mind those kinds of things. There's other things we need to be mindful of, though. Defaults are still way too high. Still about a 25% default rate, and 65 to 70% of those that get defaulted end up with signed orders of eviction. We don't always know what happens with those because the court still doesn't track the actual evictions that bailiffs do, but it's still way too high. We need to do more on that. Hopefully the outreach stuff that the city is talking about is one way of getting to that. We're looking at an end to funding June 30th, 2026. We have to be mindful of that and be looking at other creative ways to continue this program with the city, with foundations, what have you. It's obvious it's going to be less supportive support we're going to get from the federal government coming up in the looming years. We have to be aware of that. And lastly, I just want to say about evictions, what matters. It matters keeping people in their homes. Yes, absolutely. All for it. But it also matters people not being evicted. Because what is an eviction? An eviction is a dumpster being delivered to your home. Thank you, Kwame Kilpatrick, who thought that the problem with evictions was that it was litter. And that was actually said to me in the mayor's office, not this mayor, but Kilpatrick. Dumpsters delivered there, and every single thing that family owns is thrown in a dumpster and hauled away. We're not just talking about chairs and beds, bedroom sets and what have you that can be replaced with money. We're talking about everything they own, everything the kids had, what have you. Heard a story recently on NPR on the Los Angeles fire, and what's its significance? What mattered to this person that Scott Simon interviewed in that Saturday morning was, yes, it was horrible. Yes, we nearly died. But what stuck with her and her teenage daughter that were commenting that morning was that we lost everything. We lost all our family pictures, all the kids' work. My son, my goodness, he went years through karate. You may think, well, so what? But it's important to him. A black belt in karate, there's various other things, all of it lost. I lost my high school yearbook. I mean, these are things that matter. These are what make us human. It's way beyond just a chair and a couch and a refrigerator and what have you. So we have to stop evictions and being able, even if people have to move, it is a victory when we can get them time to move, when we can have the time to work with them to move, when we can have the time to pay some of that judgment so they keep their subsidy. Keeping subsidies is a major issue. So just wanted to lay some of that out as well. I know we're short on time, and hopefully that is beneficial. Thank you.
All right, and so now I want to invite Ms. Ashley Lowe up to inform us about the materials that our organizations have been looking for.
Thanks, Diamond. It is such an honor to be a part of this program. It's something that we worked for years to get into place, this right to counsel, this ordinance getting passed. And so to be here today to talk about these great successes, the work that we're doing, and to be able to work with the people who are in this room, some of the people, the lawyers who are here, Ted, who's been doing this work an awful long time, and has said to me many years ago, I'm not retiring until we get a right to counsel in the city of Detroit. So still not retiring, but until then, that was a very important point. So glad to be a part of this. We are grateful at Lakeshore to have received a grant from the city to provide informational materials. And those materials are designed to help educate people before they come to court so that they know what they can expect, what their rights are, what they should bring with them when they get to court, and then what to expect in the process, what they're entitled to. And so these materials can be used before court, they can be used after we've met with people at court and they have questions, and they can go back to these videos and see them in these handouts and see them over and over at the time that makes sense for them, not in a place where you're at court. It's a pretty crazy place. A lot is happening and it's hard to take in all the information. So these are something to kind of reinforce what we're saying to folks in court. So just to talk about, I don't know if I can move this forward. Right, so I need a primer down. Oh, there we go. Okay, got it. Just needed you to stand up. That was it. So our grant allows us to create 45 videos. So I talked about these videos. They are short. They are recorded by our lawyers. So there are people who know what they're talking about. And we are doing 15 different videos, 15 different subject matters. And they are in 3 different languages, Spanish, English, and Arabic. Right now, we have recorded all the English videos. We are about a third of the way through the Spanish videos. We hope to have them by the end of the month, and then we'll be working on the Arabic videos as well. We've also created some fact sheets to go along with that. So for people who learn better by reading something, we'll have some fact sheets that complement those. Those fact sheets you can see at our table in the back of the room at Lakeshore Legal Aid. We have those fact sheets so you can see some samples of those. And again, 1/3 of them will be in English, 1/3 in Spanish, and 1 in Arabic. We will also be providing a flyer that can go out to people who are being faced with eviction and with the court notices so that they can see a QR code and scan it and see the videos and have links to the hub where they'll be able to see those fact sheets. And then the idea is that everything is mobile friendly. So we know that most of our clients have cell phones. Many of them do not have laptops. Many of them don't have Wi-Fi available, but most of them have cell service with the cell phone. So the idea is to get it in their hands when they can use it. We are also working on an AI chatbot to guide the tenants to that content. And we're in the initial stages of developing that tool where people will be able to ask questions, because sometimes, when you go to a website and if you don't know the right question, you don't get to the answer that you're looking for. And that's the beauty of AI chatbots, is people can ask the questions that they have, and the chatbot sorts through it to get people the information they need. So that's in the very early stages. And so we're excited about that. We are also doing, trying to get the word out in a variety of ways. So Diamond talked about the fact that there's a lot of people who don't know about this right. And our goal is to make sure that everybody who's entitled knows about it. And so we can reduce that default rate so people know there's help when they get to court. And so we are creating these videos that are customizable and in formats that other organizations can then get out to their people. So Wayne Metro is here. They can customize those videos and the flyers and then share them out with their clients. And Wisdom Institute could do the same thing. They could put those out to their lists. And so it's a way of getting the word out from people. Maybe somebody doesn't know about legal aid, but they know about Wisdom Institute and they trust that organization. And so when they see their logo, they know this is information they can trust. So I mentioned the online intake that is going to help determine clients' eligibility. So we don't want to waste people's time if they aren't eligible for services. We don't want them to stand around and wait forever. So to be able to do an online intake before they get to court and determine whether they're eligible, they can still get access to the videos and they can still come to court, but they'll know where they need to go when they get there. They don't have to waste time trying to see a lawyer if they're not eligible. And also a tool to collect that income verification. So one of our biggest challenges as lawyers in this project is making sure we get that income verification that we need for the city. And it's, you can imagine, most people who are facing eviction do not come to court with their tax returns or their pay stubs. And so they have other things on their mind that they're really concerned about. And we want to make it easy. So a way that they can upload those documents in a secure way, and we can get them into our system and then be able to support the work that we're doing. So here's what we've done so far. Can I admit somebody into, okay. Well, I don't have authority to do the admitting. So we've created these 15 videos. We're going to show you one of those as soon as I'm done talking. We have our Spanish videos in production, our fact sheets I talked about. We have the hub kind of ready, and we need to do a little testing on it and get the content loaded. And so we'll be doing that soon. One of the things that we are doing in the very near future is getting feedback from the community. So we've created these videos. We have a production company that has helped us create them. We feel really good about them, but we want to make sure that they're speaking to people. And so before we put them out into the universe, we're asking folks to come to some listening sessions and provide some feedback. So if you are interested in that, we'll ask you to sign up at our table in the back. Those listening sessions will be on March 17th and March 31st, and they'll be virtual. So people can join them from anywhere and look at some of the videos and see the content and then give us the feedback. So those are things we are working on. And now I'm going to share one of those videos with you, but I'm not going to do it because that's not my strength. All right. All right. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marie, and I'm here with Lakeshore Legal Aid staff attorney Kim Gordon, who's here to talk to us a little bit about what the court experience is like for tenants facing eviction in the city of Detroit. Kim, can you tell us what happens after a tenant receives a notice for their eviction hearing?
Yes, so after a tenant receives a notice for their eviction hearing, usually the first hearing will be a Zoom hearing. Now, at the Zoom hearing, the tenant will dial in to their courtroom that they have been assigned to, and as soon as they sign into the Zoom hearing, the best practice would be to turn your camera on, turn your microphone off, and at that point you're just waiting to be checked in. Now, when you're waiting to be checked in and your microphone is turned off, you're waiting for the court reporter or for the court to address you. Only when the court addresses you, that is when you unmute your mic and answer any questions that the court may have for you. And it might just be confirming your name, or confirming that you're here before they call your case. So you just wait patiently for the court to call on you. After they do call on you, the court will ask, would you like to speak with an attorney? Now remember, to activate right to counsel, you're going to say yes. When you say yes, the court will send you a link in order for you to activate, and you will be ushered into a breakout room to speak with a attorney at that time.
What should I know about the second hearing, the in-person hearing?
At the first Zoom hearing, you'll be given a new court date for your second hearing, which will be in person. And that means that you do have to go down to the 36th District Court for your hearing. So, of course, make note at your first Zoom hearing, make note of the second hearing date and the time and the judge. So make a note of that. And when you come to the second hearing, you just need to be prepared. You will have to be prepared to find parking. So you want to leave a little bit early. That way you can find parking. Also, in terms of the dress code, you want to be able to make sure that you are dressed for an important event or an important meeting, or dress as if you're going to church. Just dress nicely. When you arrive to the court, you will have to check into the courtroom. And what this means is there's a little kiosk right outside the courtroom where you put in your name, or you can put in your case number, and you'll find your name and you'll check off your name to let the court know that you have arrived. When the court knows that you have checked in, they know at that point whether or not they are to call your case or if your case can be called because you have checked in.
What should I bring with me to court?
When you come to your second hearing, again, bring any documents that you have that relates to your case. So again, that could be maybe receipts or correspondence, anything that relates to your case that you think will help your case. Again, you should also bring your income verification. If you have not already provided income verification to your attorney, if you were assigned an attorney, bring income verification to prove that you qualify for right to counsel. And that, again, that could be a benefit letter or your pay stubs, anything like that. When you come to court, if you have any childcare issues, bring your children. You are allowed to bring children to the court. You can also bring your phone into court. However, if you do have evidence on your phone, the court will not look at your phone for the evidence. You have to bring that in a paper format. So you have to print off, for instance, any pictures, any receipts, you have to print that off in a paper format for the court to even be able to look at it. So, but you are able to bring your phone into court.
Kim, is there anything else I should know about coming to court?
Yes, Marie. In my experience, I believe that the best thing or the best confidence booster when coming to court is to feel prepared. And when I say prepared, that means bringing all of the documents that I mentioned, bringing your income verification documents to see whether or not you qualify for right to counsel, and bringing any paperwork that you have that relates to your case. That way, if you do go and speak in front of the court, you have a level of preparedness where the court will be able to follow your line of thinking, to follow your argument, to follow your defense. The key is to come to court and feel prepared. That is the best confidence booster, I believe, when you come to court.
Thanks so much, Kim. And if people have additional questions about court or the eviction process, who can they contact?
Lakeshore Legal Aid, of course.
Thank you.
Lakeshore Legal Aid. listening, and for my panel for coming up and sharing their perspective, their insight, and just different things that we are working on. That is very much appreciated. And so at this point, we do want to open it up for any questions or comments that you all may have in person or online. And so, Lake, maybe we can start with the online audience. Is there anybody there that has questions or comments for us?
Yes, we do have one online participant with their hand raised. Jamie, your mic is enabled. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good evening. May I be heard, please?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Jamie Jr. Thank you for the information. It was very enlightening. I do have, I heard in your presentation regarding the funding, regarding your plans to do outreach. What are the barriers is the Office of Eviction Defense having when it comes to getting individuals who need your services?
Yes, thank you for your question. I heard what are the barriers that Right to Counsel is facing with making sure our tenants are fully represented.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. One of the barriers is that we still are not at full capacity, right? We had 69 attorneys working on the Right to Counsel and 36 legal assistants, but we still need more attorneys to do the work. And I think 3 to 4 weeks ago, I saw almost every agency in this room with job postings up. And so we do need more attorneys available to do the work so that our tenants are not coming up to court and we have to say, you know, we're at capacity. We want to give you brief legal services, but we can't fully represent you at this point. And so that is one of the barriers that I am aware of. There are many legal services organization attorneys in the room. And so is there anybody else that would add to that question?
We do have some difficulty retaining attorneys. We do have some difficulty recruiting attorneys just because we're not really competitive with the private market. So that is an issue, certainly.
Okay. Oh, Jeff. Is there anybody else? I mean, is that
we don't have? Oh, we do have one more. Nope, hand came down. We do not have another online question at the moment. We can take one in the room.
Is it still a law that the property owner can just ask for somebody to leave and they're not asking for money? There's no defense against that, is there, under the law right now? Yeah, and I just want to suggest, I don't know why I get an echo, but I couldn't figure out, I had to get help here how to get the virtual. You guys need a website, not just Facebook, and put the links.
Clickable link, right? That would have been
Yeah, it was very difficult.
Yes.
The link wasn't on the one I got, and it took about an hour to get it here.
Yes, thank you for your comment. I did receive feedback that our flyer would have been helpful if the link was clickable. And so I will keep that in mind for next year. So you can just click the link and join the meeting. Okay, and on the website too. We got it. We'll keep that in mind. Okay. Okay, thank you. And your question? I don't want to interrupt you, but we do have other people behind you. Yeah, there's a so ma'am, we do have other people behind you. Can we allow them time to speak as well? And if you wanna talk to me, I'm happy to talk to you after the meeting. Thank you for your comment. I did hear what you said, and I understand that it's a wraparound process that needs to happen. Not just the right to counsel. We need affordable housing. We need, people housing. We need rental control. We need a lot of public housing. We need a lot of things. And so, thank you for your comment. And it's definitely on the radar of everybody in this room. It's not just a right to counsel. It's a continuum of things that we need in the city. So, thank you for that.
We do have a question from our online audience. I just want to give a quick disclaimer here. We're going to try to keep our questions to about 2 minutes just to give everyone an opportunity to ask and be able to participate. So I'm going to just set a quick timer here. Lisa, I do see your hand is up. Your mic has been enabled. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. To unmute yourself, there's a mic icon on your Teams. If you select that, we should be able to hear you. Right now, we can't hear you. Lisa, are you still wanting to ask a question? At this point, we still can't hear you. We'll take another question in the room while you're working with Teams.
Thank you, Diamond, for your presentation and for everyone that presented on this important issue. My name is Cicely Allen. I'm with the Wisdom Institute, and I stand with the Detroit Right to Counsel Coalition. I have a couple comments. So, the Right to Counsel program exists to help correct a huge power imbalance between landlords and tenants in eviction court. As your presentation outlined, African American women are just being evicted at extreme disproportionate rates. And we have to do something to change this, right? We know the Right to Counsel has to have a long-term funding plan. It has to, because this begs the question, if it doesn't, if we're not working towards that goal, how much are our lives valued by the city of Detroit? We believe that Detroit families' lives matter. We already indicated that prior to 2020, over 30,000 Detroiters, primarily Black women and children, faced eviction. And this will be the case again if we don't fully fund this. The city of Detroit loses money every year as evicted mothers and children are forced to move out of the city to find affordable housing and have to use emergency services like relocation funding, transitional housing. The funding the right to counsel will help reduce these costs. The right to counsel should be fully funded, all funds allocated and released. And, back in 2020, we unanimously passed this thing, and we need y'all to be those same people to make sure this continues. Black women deserve it. The children deserve it. We all deserve it at the end of the day. Thank you.
Do we have anybody else online?
I don't see another hand raised. I do want to circle back to Lisa, though, see if she's still online. I don't see her anymore. And I don't see another question.
Okay.
Yes, I have two questions. And so my first question was around the future. So in the future, you were giving examples of like hubs and intake verification systems, things like that. Um, what you were not clear on though is the funding. Like, where is your idea of where the funding source is going? I mean, we know that the prices aren't competitive, as Ted indicated, that it's hard to keep staff and things. So fully funding the right to counsel, as Cicely said, it should be priority, but I didn't see it. And so my first question to you is, besides the zip codes and the community events, and the marketing kits, like where specifically have you decided or that you're going to get the funding from?
Thank you for your question. It's a question that I did address as much as I could, but maybe quickly, right? So, first of all, I did want to recognize the state grant funding that we have had, and my goal is to keep a hold of that as much as I can. So, we have the state grant funds that you all have advocated for, and I hope to see those state grant dollars renewed every year. But that is a small portion of what we need, that $4 million. Again, Mary Sheffield is also open to working with me, setting up stakeholder meetings and trying to see how we can get the funds that we need. I think a huge problem with the ordinance is that it says the city of Detroit cannot use general fund dollars for the right to counsel. And so we need to think about, other ways to do it because it's not going to be with those general fund dollars. But honestly, it's a strategy that's ongoing. I think we were able to recognize, Valerie, is it the Detroit Community Partnership Group? Downtown Detroit Partnership, who is funded with funds that are not general fund dollars. And so my goal is to try to meet with them and understand maybe we can have a similar funding structure. But these are just ideas, honestly, that I'm going to have to work through over, the next year and a half or so in terms of fully funding it. I for sure understand the importance of needing to fund this beyond June of 2026, but it's definitely a work in progress.
We don't have another question from the virtual audience at the moment.
All right, thank you. So I do have my second question, but in response to what you said, the ordinance has been almost 3 years for the ordinance itself, and so you could amend the ordinance because you're right, general funds can be used until 2026, but an ordinance, a law can be amended in the city of Detroit, the state of Michigan, in a year, so that could be amended to be changed. But I'm really curious because of course with the federal funding being cut, we are going to need the general dollars. So I would like to see the office more advocating more on behalf of trying to get a hold, not just the general fund dollars, but the city of Detroit in the budget has been having different funding sources that they haven't expected. Before, even the money from ARPA has extra money in it. That they can do. Let me be honest, it's not the word extra is correct, but they have money in the ARPA funding that can be used as well. But my second question before my time has run out, is around, see, there are some cases, of course, that end in default judgments, like around certificate of compliance. I think you said it was like 72.5% of those cases. There's also cases where the tenants live in housing that's badly needed repair. Those also end in evictions as well. So my question is, how will the Office of Eviction Defense, how would you guys ensure that the laws in the city, around the compliance and around habitable housing is being upheld in the system? Like, how would you advocate for that?
Thank you for your question. So part of the working group discussions that we have now when we're talking about improving compliance, revamping the escrow system, has included our court, right? I can't control decisions that are made within the court. That is up to our judges to, uphold the law when our attorneys are making those arguments. And so from my end of things, the goal is to make sure that we call the court up when we can and kind of bring them to the table and kind of talk about some of the challenges that our tenants are facing with habitability, and they're aware of it, right? They're aware of the fact that there's most of our tenants are living in homes that don't have the certificate of compliance and the rental registration. And so they've been attending the meetings and the work groups to hear, from our tenant advocates about what needs to happen and what we're looking for from the court. And so I think just engaging the court as much as I can and taking comment from you back to them is kind of what I can do, on top of, like I said, making sure we have certain protections in place, such as the escrow system. And so it was a system that most of our tenants could not safely access a year ago. And hopefully this summer we will have an escrow system that works for our tenants and is easier to access. And so that can also put some pressure on these landlords to get their properties registered and in compliance. But that is the top things that I'm thinking about at this point. Lawyers in the room, is there anything that you would add to that? No, Ted?
Well, it is going to take coordination with the courts, building and safety, advocacy, what have you. I mean, historically, the problem's been, from where I sit, is that the court has not felt that the city had the capacity to do. And I think that's a wrongful way for judges to look at it, but had the capacity to do inspections, and it would be too much of a burden to put on the landlord to have to comply with CFC registration and all of that. That's crazy. But I think that we need to push the court more for that. I would hope the city, who provides funding for the court, would have some conversations there that would be able to be productive as well. And I would hope that when we come up with a new process for escrow, and I know HRD is looking at a lot of different possibilities, or it seems like they're looking at a lot of different possibilities, that might be one thing. But the old law dealing with escrow was counterproductive. Required you to have a lease. I had judges saying that if you didn't put your money in escrow, retaliation didn't even apply, which is garbage. Retaliation law is statewide. If you complain to building and safety and your landlord tries to evict you because of that, that's retaliation. So there needs to be better coordination at all levels between the city and the court, and vice versa. I was hopeful that building and safety being at the court, and they have been now for 4 or 5 months or more, that there would be some greater dialogue, and I think that's starting to happen. And we help get that going as well. We share the schedules and everything, the court dockets with building and safety. We've had a number of meetings with them. I'm very hopeful of some of the things going on there, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. You mentioned something about defaults as well, I think, and that's still a horrible problem. In Detroit, the mail system is horrible, and it's been horrible since 2020, and we all know why it's been horrible since 2020, because in big cities, a certain person running for president re-election at that time didn't want people in those cities to be able to have good mail service, to send their ballots back and what have you. It takes sometimes 3 and 4 weeks for us to get a letter from the 36th District Court to our offices about a mile away, maybe a little more than a mile away. I've talked to people at the court who live downtown and say it takes them that length of time. So when the court sets a new hearing and mails out a notice to a tenant to come back in 2 weeks, and a tenant doesn't come back, guess why? Because they have no notice. So we've been trying to find the capacity to be able to knock on doors, deliver notices, explain to people on their porch steps and what have you. We need more help for that. We need more Jim Dwights that can go help get to people and in your community to get to people. So, I mean, that's one way to get into that. And again, 25% default rate, 65 to 70% of those that go to default end up with a signed order of eviction, which is what the bailiff has to have in their hands to do the eviction. If we could make a huge dent in that, that would make a huge dent in evictions in Detroit.
Thank you, Diamond, and thank you for the panel. My name is Jim Dwight. I live in District 1, and I'm with the Detroit Right to Counsel Coalition. And I've sat in the living rooms of over 20 people who are facing eviction and talked with the families and met the children. And there was one little girl that came up and said, if we have to move, do I have to move from my school, which is right down the street? Well, yes. That if they move somewhere else in Detroit, that's a possibility. So in Detroit, there are 156,754 children under the age of 18. Third graders in Detroit that have met or exceeded the grade level standards, 14% for third graders. Eighth graders, it's 10%. Part of the problem with people being evicted is their children then have to move to different schools. And you know what that's like to move to a school, you're a new kid, it's a problem. So my question is that we reached out to Mary Kavanaugh, Senator Mary Kavanaugh, and to Senator Stephanie Chang, and we got $4 million from them. Is that being used right now? That $4 million, is that being paid to attorneys and to whatever in right to counsel?
Just in case you're not finished. So right now we've gotten 2.5 million of those funds, meaning that we signed a contract for that with the state. And so the request for proposals that I have out for outreach and legal services, full representation, that is the 2.5 million from the state. The 1.5 million from Senator Kavanaugh, I have not received anything from the state regarding that yet. I'm assuming I'm going to have something in a couple months, and I can reach out to you all and let you know when it's received, because I have received feedback from the coalition that there are different needs that the community wants to consider spending that money for. Happy to have discussion about that.
I will talk to you.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
it was last April.
It was.
Yes. And then I have one suggestion. When I've done court watch, often one of the judges will say, do you want an attorney? When people, well, no, I'm poor, that's why I'm here. I'd love one, but do you want a free attorney? You want this is free representation. Please, if you could talk to the judges down there to say that, you can go to room 417 and get a free attorney.
Comments back here? Yes.
I'm wondering, in the ordinance, when you said that general funds cannot fund right to counsel, I'm not sure if that's actually written in the ordinance or if that's an interpretation of the ordinance. I think it might be an interpretation and not the language of the ordinance. Just saying. Thank you.
So I'm one of the attorneys who's down at 36th District Court, and one of the things that we see, and I think Ted and others can reinforce this, is that a number of the folks that we're seeing, they're coming back a second time, and oftentimes it's because they do have to leave. And oftentimes they have to leave because the property is not habitable. It's not up to code. They've complained about it. And the judges say, well, okay, it's better for you to get out of there if it's not good. So then they're pushed into another situation where they're in another bad housing, where they don't have other options. And something that could really be helpful, and I know a number of us try to do it ad hoc, but it's not part of it, is some kind of relocation, navigation, counseling, whatever you want to call it, support, so that people aren't continually on this treadmill of going from one bad place to another bad place, or worse, they are getting scammed by some landlord who gets into a lockbox, or purported landlord who gets keys in a lockbox, says, oh, yeah, I own this property here, give me $1,500 and you can move in. 3 months later, they're being evicted by the person who actually does own it. So some of those funds, I would encourage you to look at in the future, having counseling support for people, for relocation, for what happens next, so that they're not coming back again, okay?
Encourage you to maybe put in a proposal, or let's talk about it, right? There's funds available, and I'm looking for different outreach strategies. I'm looking for feedback like that to spend these funds. And so let's talk about it, or put in a proposal, and let's see if we can make that happen, or look into making that happen.
name is Eunice Bell. I'm with the Wisdom Institute. I just want to reiterate on what the young man said. What the young man said right there. I'm sorry. I don't like holding mics. Okay, so he said the state of Michigan has contributed $4 million to the right of counsel. Since 2023, the state gave $4 million to the right of counsel program as of Thursday, Friday, February 27th. None of that money has been released from the city to support legal representation of qualifying tenants in eviction court. And I just want to know, why is that? You know, why is that not happening for the people that really, really need? It's a lot of young women and children that's out here really homeless and helpless, and we all trying to figure it out for ourselves and with them. You know, I'm done.
So the $4 million, I have been informed that that has been awarded to the right to counsel. I have not heard from Senator Kavanaugh yet in terms of when I will actually be able to access the 1.5 million. Typically, the state sends over a contract that I have to review and we have to sign, and it's this whole process. But the 1.5 million, even though Right to Counsel Coalition advocated for it last year, I still have not received any documentation regarding that 1.5 million. The 2.5 million, there are currently 2 requests for proposals out. One is for outreach with 225,000 attached to that. One is for full legal representation with about 2.2 million attached to that. And so that is where those funds are. And we have proposals out for, your organization, for example, could put in a proposal for outreach. Our legal services organizations can put in a proposal for full legal representation. But that is where the 2.5 million is. And as soon as I hear about the 1.5 million, I will let you all know. Yeah.
I just want to interject for a moment. We currently don't have any questions from our virtual audience, but it's okay. But we originally had public questions and comments scheduled up until 7:15. I just want to let the virtual audience know that if there's anyone who wants to speak to an attorney virtually, I can put you in a breakout room so that you can have that conversation while we're still taking comments in the room and from the virtual audience. So I just want to let you know that that is still an option all the way up until 8 p.m. So you can take your question.
So I'm Allison Putt from Detroit People's Platform, and I'm here with the Right to Counsel Coalition as well. I have 3 completely unrelated questions. So with this, would it maybe be more helpful if I do them one by one? Okay. So my first question has to do with a budget, which is not, looking back, it's looking forward. We are in the budget season, and under the ordinance, the office is required to do an annual budget, post it, and then to come back and revise it in July of every year. Where is that posted? And then where does that show up in the calendar of the budget hearings this year?
Thank you, Allison. So the budget itself and also the full Right to Counsel report, right? There is a report that I need to release every year to talk about the demographics and the outcomes. And so that report plus the budget will be released within the next week. For the sake of time, I did not go through all of the demographics and outcomes, but that full ordinance report and budget will be on the Right to Counsel website within a week. And I will send you a link, the Right to Counsel Coalition, a link to that, our city council, our mayor, but for everyone in the room, you will be able to access that budget. Your second question was regarding budget hearings and was it budget hearings and where we are on the calendar?
Well, that's not technically my second question. I guess it's 1A, 1B. Sorry, if we're properly numbering. So I guess I don't know if your office is going to show up as a part of one of like the HRD budget hearings, or is that going to happen?
At this point, Allison, no, but that does not mean it cannot happen. I think, Conrad, do you have any response or feedback on this?
law department budget is March the 19th. I think that if I remember it, I don't know, Diamond, if you're a line item in my budget, the line item in the law department budget or not. I think RTC has its own budget. So if you don't have a hearing, I think that's largely because the dollars have already been allocated, correct? Yeah. Right. So I think when you post your budget, that's why you're not going to have a hearing, because the dollars have already been allocated. It's not that the legislature is going to make a decision to give you money that they've already provided, I think.
Okay, number two. Sorry. So last year at this public meeting, there were almost all of the judges on the docket for the housing court. I haven't been to court myself in a couple of months, but I don't recognize anyone here that's on the court. So I'm just curious, where are our elected officials? If anyone does know. I mean, it's a bit of a rhetorical question at this point, I guess, because I know that. I'm sorry, can you say it for the folks at home?
The presiding judge, who was very pro right to counsel and worked hard, is no longer on that docket. There's a new presiding judge as of, I guess, in the last couple of weeks. I don't know why she has risen here. And I think there's also one other new judge since last time. Judge Kennedy was on the bench, I believe, a year ago, and she's no longer on the bench there. So there has been some turnover, but why they're not here, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. And then, sorry, everyone, I appreciate your patience with me. So my last question is, initially in your funding sources, you included the Gilbert family money, but then when you went to reporting, you're not allowed to report on that, or you don't have the information. So I guess I'm just confused. Is that part of the right to counsel? Because it sounds like they have lower restrictions than the right to counsel program. Is their money actually part of the right to counsel, or is it just kind of a helpful side benefit? So maybe you could clarify that for me.
Thanks, Allison. I will start by saying that Gilbert Family Foundation is definitely a partner that has been pouring into the right to counsel bucket. It's not that they will not share data with me. In fact, we have Paris here who's always open to sharing data with me. And I think it's just a lot of cases, right? And so we kind of separate out what the city is doing versus what Gilbert Family Foundation is doing. But to your question, if they're a helpful sidebar, I'm not really sure.
I guess so. The reason I potentially could have framed it differently, but the right to counsel has a requirement of full representation for every single person who receives funding, and that is not the case for the Gilbert family funding. And I understand that there are different reasons for that, but I just don't. It appears to be a bit inconsistent in the accounting versus the programming.
Thank you, Allison. What I provided in the report are only cases for full legal representation, but I do want to recognize that when we talked about, I think there was over 8,000 cases for 2024 that received full legal representation. The city by itself did not pay for all of those tenants, right? We only paid for 6,085. That means a portion of those full rep cases were paid for by Gilbert and our other partners. And I think it's only fair to recognize that, with the understanding that I do understand your point. We don't want to water down right to counsel. We don't want to have it where we're including just brief legal services and calling that, full representation. Absolutely not. All cases that close under the city are full legal representation. But I do have to flag that we aren't paying for all of those cases. Gilbert Family Foundation and other partners are covering the full rep as well. Does that help?
Remember that before there was City of Detroit, there was the Gilbert Family Foundation. They were doing this work before we were. the law is specifically related to City of Detroit ARPA dollars. It doesn't extend to the Gilbert Family Foundation dollars that they voluntarily participate in the program. And again, as everyone in this room knows, Gilbert was there first. They lit the way, the pathway that the city followed. So it's you know, I mean, no one can deny their commitment to this work. They've been at it longer than anybody, except for Ted and his team. Yeah. Okay.
So I don't think this was your question, but I think it lifted something up for me. There's this distinction between full representation and advice and brief service, and there is a place for both. And so I think all of us who are the lawyers doing this work believe very strongly that we need to give the services that the clients need from us and that they want. And sometimes we have to have a conversation with them to determine if they're eligible. And that is not full representation. We're just doing a screening and we have to pay for that somehow. And sometimes people don't want us to represent them. They've got our advice, they have something that's pretty straightforward. They're just going to go in and handle it on their own, and that feels right to them. And that's good. And we should still support that as part of this program because it's all part of the whole spectrum of services that are available. And I'm not saying we should water down full representation, but we should give people, there's a whole range of things that we need to do in order to implement this program.
And the Gilbert Fund also has done other things as well. I mentioned that there's a need to do door knocking. We don't have enough funds there with the Gilbert because there's a desperate need for full representation, but they do provide some of that, so we can get some of that done. The Gilbert Fund has also allowed us to use some funds for helping to pay for rents. That was mentioned earlier, people being evicted. So there is a need for a broad range of things. Sir, full representation, I'd be the first in line to say we need to get everyone fully represented, but there's a whole host of other things if this is going to work. Somebody mentioned relocation help and stuff like that. When the city came to us in the fall of 2020, when COVID hit, the $5 million was for all of those kinds of things. And that was not enough money, but very helpful. And I think we need to look at that as a strategy overall if we're going to end evictions, if we're going to stop people from losing their subsidies and all of those kinds of things. All of those services are needed.
And then I just want to interject once more. We're hitting 7:30, and I want to make sure that all of our attendees online know that there is a virtual attorney available if you need to speak with someone. I can put you in a private breakout room to have those private conversations, but I just want to interject while we're taking questions in the room. If anyone has questions online, please feel free to raise your hand, and I will unmute your mic so that you can ask those questions. And I do apologize for taking another question in the room. Go for it.
Good evening, everyone. Just a comment, actually. So my name is Renita Powell. I am one of the division managers for Detroit Housing Services Office. We are housed within the Housing and Revitalization Department. I noticed that the attorney referenced relocation services and efforts. And so wanted to just make for sure that our individuals online and those that are here are aware of the services that we do provide for relocation services. So we have folks that are coming into the Detroit Housing Resource Helpline that are in need of services due to facing eviction, possibly house fires, living in uninhabitable housing, as well as elevated blood lead levels. And so I want to let the citizens know that there is a resource that is available. Oftentimes there is not enough information that is out there. So residents don't know that there are services available to help them with relocation efforts. I know that Right to Counsel is capped at 200% FPO, but with our program, we are capped at 300% FPO, which also extends the opportunity for individuals that have a little bit of a higher income to still receive relocation supporting services. And so with those services, we do provide a connection to employment opportunities as well as connection to local landlords within the city of Detroit. So we want to make for sure that we provide an equitable way for folks to actually access affordable housing. But just wanted to make for sure that that resource was available for all the individuals online as well as those that are here. So thank you.
Yes, I have more of a comment. I know one thing I was asking about is the funding for the future, and I know you said that you were thinking about the programs and outside funding, but there is definitely a need for getting funding out of the general fund, which is why I reminded you, if you didn't know, as far as the 2026, I'm aware we can't get the funding out of the out of the general funds until 2026, but it can be amended. But even if it's not amended, I would like to see you go to participate in the budget hearings that's happening in the month of March, because there is the interest rate. When I said about the ARPA, and I couldn't remember the number, there is interest rate on the ARPA. Any money that sits anywhere has interest rates, right? There's interest rate on the ARPA funding, but then also the online gaming tax. Like, you could ask for things like that where there's millions of dollars in those. And I understand that Conrad Malice said that, you give your report, you don't have to, but I'm asking because you're directing a program that's much needed. It's a tool to prevent the unhoused population from growing, as you gave your numbers and the decrease in things. I'm asking that you actually show up at at the hearings, do a presentation or request some of the funding, look into it. Those is one of the funding sources I said that we have, this year, as a few years have been passing, we have had those funding sources. I would prefer that our funding sources to go into that than to go, the mayor would create, demolition. I would prefer our sources to go to community being housed when they need it, whether if it's temporary housing, whether it's relocation, no matter where it's at, I would prefer it to go there.
For your comment. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for your presentation. I'm Latanya Bell, and I'm with the Wisdom Institute, also with the Detroit Right to Counsel, and I just really have a comment. And my comment was just to make sure that we are considering our the mental health status of those folks that are being evicted. Just wanting to uplift that organizations that are able to support with mental health, hopefully they are a part of the funding and a part of this conversation, because I believe that it's something that is needed. It's going to be needed now and forever. So I'm just hoping that someone could apply for the dollars that has the capacity to help with sustaining mental health.
That's a really important point. Thank you for that. And I don't think I've connected, unfortunately, with our Wayne County Community Mental Health. And so that is a gap that I plan to make a connection with.
We do have one question from the online audience.
Okay, so
Amy, I see your hand up. I have enabled your mic. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
I just want to say, before that person gets started, after that, we are going to wrap the Q&A session. And so thank you all. If there is, you still have a question or a comment, we will show you a QR code in a minute where you can, put your question or your comment there, and we will try our best to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing me the chance to speak again. I hope you all can hear me. During your presentation, you talked about improving the intake process. You mentioned the online. I would like to encourage you all to, as the young lady said, about our individuals that experience mental health disabilities, as I like to call them. There are also individuals that experience physical disability, and along with housing being in disrepair, it is also dangerous. People are renting to individuals who have disabilities, and the housing is not adequate, but it's the only thing that's out there. And so people are in untenable conditions for many different reasons. The other thing I wanted to say is ensure that there are multiple ways for individuals to fill out intake forms. You have various organizations. You have social justice organizations like Detroit People's Platform. You have the Wisdom Institute. You have several disability organizations around the city, and you have the Office of Disability Affairs that should be utilized to assist people, not just people with disabilities, but also individuals that may have literacy issues, to access the services that they need to house and keep their families safe. Thank you.
Thank Thank you for that comment. I will take all of those suggestions, not just into consideration, but try to weave them into our process. Ashley, maybe we can think of some creative ways as we kind of build out this online intake system. And so, thank you all for attending. I really appreciate you all for being here for our annual Right to Counsel meeting. These slides, as I mentioned, the ordinance report, the budget will be posted to the Right to Counsel website within the next week. And until next year, thank you.
For those that are still online, we will have a virtual attorney available up until 8 p.m. So if you need to speak to an attorney, please feel free to raise your hand and I will put you in a private room. If you don't have time to sit with an attorney today, please feel free to scan the QR code on your screen and fill out the intake form and an attorney will follow up with you. Again, thank you for attending the 2025 RTC public meeting.